Alright everyone, and well, I should say movie fans, getting back to movies, my top 10 list of what I think the most underrated and underappreciated movies of 2018 are. Yes, these are the films that I think are, well, as you'd expect, underappreciated, could have gotten better reviews, and I think are still watchable. And if you don't agree with me, then oh well. Then otherwise, this is just my opinion. So here we go, top 10 most underrated movies in my opinion, starting with number 10, Venom. Alright, well, I sort of anticipated this movie for this year, and I was a little skeptical, especially after hearing it was only PG-13 rated, and most critics were not very welcoming to this movie, and I can definitely see why. The plot is not very strong, and I almost thought it was going to tie in with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but unfortunately it doesn't. But you gotta give credit to some things. Tom Hardy. He is a way better Venom than Topher Grace. I mean, it's not Topher Grace's fault, he was just badly miscasted in that role, but we can say one thing, it's definitely much better than critics make it out to be. There are some scenes that, well, the movie starts out a little slow at the start, little character build-up, and then, yeah, there are some silly moments, and there's some parts that he goes really over the top. But he was actually a lot of fun to watch, and this film was pretty entertaining for 2.5 hours runtime. And yeah, there even is a mid-credit scene, which I recommend sitting through, but I just don't know if it's really going to go much further. But it made a lot of money, so die-hard Marvel fans, they went a little easy on this film. They enjoyed it for what it is, and I sort of did. It's at least guilty pleasurable. If you didn't like it, that's fine. But take my word for it, it's much better than critics make it out to be. Number 9. Rampage. Okay, yes, based off the video game, and I use that term very loosely because it doesn't really follow the video game 100%. In fact, it doesn't really at all. It goes off on its own foot. And we know video game-based movies don't really have the best track record in history, but this is probably the best one you'll get if I use that term. And yeah, I know. It's silly. It's at least guilty pleasurable for the most part. The Rock is always fun to watch, but he's a little too predictable, you know, with most of the stuff that he's in as the main character. It's the same director from San Andreas, so it's a little bit cheesy. I know the effects are CG, and it feels more like a Godzilla-ish type movie, you know, being that he's a giant ape and fighting against, of course, a giant alligator, a giant wolf, and it's fun to watch. It's good trashy popcorn entertainment. I know the villains are a bit cliche if I do use that term, and I know there's a lot of ridiculous parts in this movie, but overall, I was pretty entertained by it for the most part. It's watchable. And yeah, I know it's kind of ridiculous how they have a Rampage arcade game in the background, clearly, but once you look past all the cheesy stuff, it's still actually watchable. It's probably the best one you'll come across for a video game-based movie, and it's guilty pleasurable. Again. So, give it a watch. The Rock can still kick some ass. Number 8, The House with a Clock in Its Walls. Yes, starring Jack Black, who I know is not really a favorite of everybody's. You know, he's the kind of actor you either love or love to hate him. You know, and he's been in some good films, which are funny, and then he's also starred in some crap movies. So, and this one is not really that bad. It's silly, I understand that. But I like the nostalgic feel to it, you know, like it takes place in the 50s or 60s, even though it's obviously long before I was born, but I don't mind it actually. I mean, yes, it's made by Universal, even like the intro with the old school Universal logo, again, tries to give it that old school type of feel, and again, it's silly. I understand that, you know, with everything moving and whatnot, but I really don't think it's the worst. It's got an interesting story behind it once you get past all that silly stuff. You get some giggles. Yes, you got Cate Blanchett, who's surprisingly not a villain in this movie. I mean, there's been other films where she's not a villain. And the kid, I think, did a pretty good job, too, as well. So, definitely check it out. If you don't like it, fine. I respect it. It's definitely not the most seriously approach-taken type of movie, but it's definitely far from the worst. Number 7, Alpha. Okay, I know this is not really a movie for everybody. Subtitles. But its prehistoric feel, being that it takes place in the caveman era, all about, I don't know if it's historically accurate, but it's a pretty believable plot. About man with man's best friends, origin story of it. I don't know if it's 100% true, but I like the atmosphere. I like the story. Again, none of it's in actual spoken English. I know subtitle reading is annoying, but it's not the first of these movies that I've seen. And for an hour and a half, I think it was pretty entertaining. It had some pretty good action, a few slow parts, but it did the job, I think, for what it could. And it had a nice feel to it as well. Good survival story. So, check it out. If you don't like reading subtitles all the way through, then this may not be for you. Otherwise, I've seen much worse than this. Number 6, Adrift. Supposedly based on a true story, and I don't know how accurate it is to the real story about a husband and wife who, were on vacation on the Pacific Ocean, but of course that all turns south in a bad way, I should say, when a hurricane and they have to survive it. The husband's badly injured, and, they have to try to survive throughout the whole course of the trip with all odds against them. And I actually thought it was a pretty good story. Not perfectly paced, but the performances I'll give credit to. There's a lot of flashback sequences. I know it gets annoying, and it's not exactly perfectly paced, again. But you'd have to expect, a lot of it. It's a survival story. And I think the outcome is pretty underappreciated for the most part. Again, performances are great, so may not be for everybody once again, but check it out. It's pretty good. Number 5, Maze Runner, The Death Cure. The conclusion to this, somewhat decent trilogy. It's not as bad as Twilight or 50 Shades, but it's got some good action. It's got some pretty likable characters. It's, the dystopian kind of movie. And this one may seem a little long, but trust me, it does get somewhere. It does have a lot going on in it. Of course, the villain and some of the stuff is a little predictable, but I think it did the job for a good conclusion. It definitely has a few decent surprises to it that some people may not have liked, but it was pretty good. A few far-fetched moments, but I think it's a pretty nice close to this somewhat decent trilogy. Number 4, Bohemian Rhapsody. Based on, and I know it's not historically 100% accurate about Queen, how they wrote the song Bohemian Rhapsody, but it focuses more on the group's troubles with one of the band members, Freddie Mercury, having a lot of personal issues. And I think this one was pretty convincing. It was a little long, but damn, the songs and all the concert scenes, that's where it was really great. And it had me wanting to at least tap my foot for the most part and sing most of these songs because, I am a fan of Queen. So, performances were great. That's all I can say. If you love Queen, this is definitely a film that will rock you. Number 3, The Old Man and the Gun. Okay, I thought Robert Redford was all done with acting, but nope, I guess he's not. And this movie, I guess, is going to be one of his last movies, I assume. Maybe, I don't know, but I think it was a pretty good comedy film, about heist and all that, and it had a pretty good feel to it. He's still a pretty likable actor, and for the most part, this film was actually pretty amusing and had a good charm to it as well. So, check it out if you think he's lost his roots with his acting skills. I think he's still got it. Number 2, The Mule. Yes, you think Robert Redford needs to retire? Well, Clint Eastwood has definitely got the age on him, and a lot of people think he's lost his directing and acting skills. I think he's still got it with this one. This has been a real mixed bag amongst most fans, and it's somewhat based on a true story about a drug mule, who's obviously was a former gardenist. I don't know if that was really 100% true, but this film, a lot of critics didn't really like it as much. It's no Gran Torino, but I actually didn't mind it. I mean, the pacing may have been inconsistent at some parts, but I think Clint Eastwood definitely had a pretty good field performance. It's definitely not his, angry side like Gran Torino, but it's good that he shows a little more versatility in his performance and directing, because, this is not the first film he's directed as well as starred in pretty much 90% of the time. So, it's pretty good. Ignore the critics, go see it for yourself. May not be his best, but it's far from his worst. And the number 1 film that I think is the most underrated this year? A Simple Favor. Yes, Directed by the same guy who, of course, directed The Heat, which is probably my favorite movie out of this guy. And yes, I know he's been known for directing a lot of movies starring Melissa McCarthy, like that film, Bridesmaids, and of course, the crappy Ghostbusters reboot. But have no fear, this one is pretty damn good, and that's why I think it's underrated. May not be for everybody because of the amount of obscenities in it, and it is a complex story, and it stars Anna Kendrick, who is a pretty damn good actress, I will say. She pulls off the role pretty good in this as trying to figure out a rather complex case when one of her friends go missing. And yeah, it's gets you really thinking. And yeah, she's played by Blake Lively, so not to give too much away, yeah, it's very well paced. Again, may not be for everybody, being that's a real thinker movie, but that's what it is, basically. So I'm not going to say much more there. Go check it out for yourself. It's already on Blu-ray. That's my most underrated movies list that I think of 2018. Till next time, I apologize for the delay, of course. I know you're expecting this video and I get it done usually before the year is up, but till next time, I think you know what's next, people. Yep. Keep watching.